Program Chair for the Anne Arundel County League of Women Voters. We are happy to have you here this afternoon for our discussion of transportation. The League has a long-held position on transportation. In fact, it was adopted in 1988. And the League supports development and improvement of public transportation in Anne Arundel County and encourage the county government to have thorough professional studies made of the transportation needs of various sectors of the population, to develop proposals for meeting the needs and to find ways to implement appropriate proposals. The League of Women Voters of Anne Arundel County should evaluate proposals using relevant criteria regarding users' concerns, economics, physical matters, and environmental impact. We've been waiting a long time for something to happen in the area of transportation here. We're here today to talk about a proposal for regional transportation. And we have Mr. Richard Newell from the City of Annapolis and John Powell from Howard County. Let me tell you about both of them, a little bit about both of them, and then I'm going to turn the program over to them. Both of them have long and varied careers in transportation. Mr. Newell brings 38 years of transportation experience to Annapolis in such positions as a mechanic, driver, and director of bus and rail operations. He assumed responsibility of the Annapolis Department of Transportation in October of 2010. He has, while in that position, he's reduced operating costs while maintaining accountability and performance, and has addressed the department's challenges in the areas of vehicle maintenance, on-time performance, and customer service. During the 18 months prior to his appointment, he directed the Maryland Transit Administration's 51 transit routes, which serve 268,000 riders a day. He was responsible for the oversight of 14 managers and 1,200 bus operators from 4 divisions. His focus while at the Maryland Transit Administration was on reducing costs while delivering reliable service and strong customer service. Mr. Powell is the administrator for the Office of Transportation for Howard County Government. In this position, he's responsible for overseeing the contract with the Central Maryland Regional Transit Corporation, who is managing the Howard Transit fixed route and HT Ride paratransit operations for the county. He's also responsible for coordinating with the Department of Planning and Zoning and other county departments on other transportation-related activities, including but not limited to pedestrian walkways, bicycle paths, and transportation demand management programs. He's been involved in public transit in Maryland for almost 5 years, which included the position of Chief Executive Officer for CMRT. Previously, he was Executive Director for a nonprofit organization that coordinated with the federal government and local jurisdictions in the review and implementation of advanced technology vehicles such as electric and fuel cell buses. Mr. Powell has been involved in public transit activities for over 50 years and has enjoyed time in Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Connecticut, Tennessee, and Massachusetts. I turn the program over to you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is, as was said, I am Richard Newell, the Director of the Department of Transportation for the City of Annapolis. I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself, just so that you know who it is that is talking to you and you can frame what it is that I have to say. I'm a third generation transit professional. My grandfather was a Pullman porter. My father started out as a diesel mechanic and ultimately was part owner of one of the first African-American owned charter company in the state of Ohio. My greatest aspiration in life was to be like my father. And I can't begin to tell you how I felt the day that he patted me on the shoulder and said, "Son, you're just not a mechanic." And he advised me to get a good education and find some work to do in the office. My father had a problem with me washing my hands after each job. He thought I was trying to be a little bit too cute. But he told me, if you work very hard, he said, you're going to meet a lot of people that are smarter than you. Don't ever let anyone outwork you. And if you work real hard, you're going to do okay, but you're just not a mechanic. And he told me that because he knew how much I wanted to be like him. But I took his advice, and I can tell you in 38 years, I've worked 7 different jobs in transit, and ultimately in my career in the city of Cleveland, the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, I ended up managing bus and rail. And the diversity that is associated with my career was directly related to me taking the opportunity to meet challenges that were in the organization that I worked for. And I'm telling you all that to tell you this. I developed into a change agent. I'm not a very good caretaker manager. If you're happy with the way things are and you just want somebody to do the day-to-day, I got to tell you, I bore very quickly when it comes to things like that. After spending 32 years in the city of Cleveland with the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, it became very clear to me, my boss, who we became so close, we were like brothers. To this day, we're like brothers. He's about 13 years older than me, and he's not thinking about retiring. He wasn't thinking about retiring when I left the city of Cleveland. But he advised me to look for opportunities elsewhere. At the time, I had an empty nest, and he said, in this business, if you're willing to travel, you will never be unemployed, and you will always be able to advance. I ended up over here at the Maryland Department of Transit Administration, excuse me. I was asked to come and serve as the director of bus operations. I was asked to do the same thing I did in Cleveland, which was to unite the management of bus and rail. We had a situation where bus supervisors would be near a rail incident, but they didn't know enough about rail, and they didn't have to tell the public, I don't know. I'm calling for a rail supervisor. Well, we successfully united those two operations. And while I was here at the Maryland Transit Administration, it came to my attention that there was a challenge here in the city of Annapolis. As a matter of fact, my friend John Powell was one of the first individuals I talked to. I was introduced to him by the administrator of the Maryland Transit Administration. He said, we want you to go down to the city of Annapolis and do an assessment. And when I got down here, I can tell you that less than 40% of the fleet was operational. Bus body parts were being held together by duct tape. I gave them my assessment, and it was very simple. I said, you just lack standard operating procedures. A few months later, they asked me if I would come down here and assume the position of the Department of Transportation. I'm accustomed to servicing in Cleveland 258,000 units of service every day. I did that by leading a team of 60 managers and supervisors. through 1,300 bus and rail operators and paratransit operators. I was accustomed to being in a transit authority where all things were transit. Came to Maryland Transit Administration while it's a little more political, same size model. So it was not strange to me that people said, why are you going to Annapolis? I came because it's the capital city. And in my mind, I was being given the opportunity to right what was wrong in transit in the capital city of Maryland. I was asked to do two things. I was asked to put the system in a state of good repair and to place it on a sustainable path. I got to tell you, while I enjoy hearing people say things like, I've done such a great job of fixing the Department of Transportation, more specifically transit, when I'm around people like John Powell, I have to be honest. Any professional worth their weight in salt in our business could have done the same thing, because we implemented standard operating procedures. We made sure that there was a standard maintenance program in place. We made sure that every rule that we have, to the extent that we can enforce it, that we enforce it. And if there's an unimportant rule, you let me know what it is. I'll get rid of it, because in order for us to serve the public as we need to, we have to be systematic about the way that we do things. And I got to tell you, while I'll be the first to tell you there's plenty of work for us that's left to do, when I look at the system today versus 3 years ago, we're in much better shape. We're in a state of good repair, and with the exception of some capital projects that we have going on in the facilities, for the most part, the system is able to do what it's supposed to do. We don't miss very many trips. Our on-time performance is in the 90 percentile. Then we go to the second goal that I was given, to place it on a sustainable path. Folks, I got to tell you, and I know that you've read about all of the challenges associated with the Department of Transportation. When you think about all the things that you've read, I'm going to ask you to consider this. Here in the city of Annapolis, by ordinance, parking dollars that are not committed to servicing the debt are supposed to support transit. Now, when I got here and told we also want you to be responsible for parking, I went down in the garages of the city. At 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, you could throw a rock and not hit a car. Because the perception was the place to park here in the city of Annapolis is Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium. Oh, and by the way, we run a free shuttle from Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium down into the Central Business District. Well, without giving you all the detail of what we did and why we did it, I can tell you that we implemented a circulator for connectivity between all the parking facilities and the Central Business District. In addition to that, we implemented market pricing in the garages. The result of that has been, for the last 3 years running, the revenues and the occupancy rates in our garages have risen. The revenues by double digits. And in one of those 3 years, the occupancy rates by double digits. But you keep hearing about deficits in the Department of Transportation. Well, you probably read during FY14 about $900,000 in complimentary services. They weren't being accounted for. Now they're accounted for. What is it that I'm trying to say to you here? Transit in a municipal model is inundated by factors that are associated with politics. Transit in a transit authority, in a regional model, is all the business that you deal with is all things transit. Now this is important for this reason. The city of Annapolis is caught between two opinions. And to their credit, this city has supported transit for decades beyond what most small cities do. Most small cities have gone to a regional model. When we have economic challenges and we have to start prioritizing, transit is pretty low on the totem pole of priorities. That's not good, it's not bad, it's our reality. The rest of the country has gone to a regional model for a reason. There's economies of scale associated with all jurisdictions in a certain region committing their transit dollars to one model. There are opportunities to get rid of inefficiencies instead of duplicating administrative cost and things of that nature. It's all under one model. And I'm going to go one further than that. Here in the city, up until we implemented the circulator, our transit agency, for the most part, only serviced the transit dependent. One of the main things that we were trying to eliminate was being so lopsided in the portion of the community that we support and service. The first year people asked, why are you running those empty buses up and down the street every 10 minutes? The first year we serviced 9,000 customers. The second year we serviced 74,000 customers. The last time we reported was 162,000 customers. Our goal is 1,000 customers a day. The circulator is servicing all segments of the community. Folks in Ward 1 who don't want to drive their car can walk up to the end of the street, jump on the circulator, go down the main street in any part of downtown that they want to go to. It was important to Annapolis Transit that we not be a transit-dependent only city department. And having done that, in the business I say, now the middle class has some skin in the game. Because in the absence of people seeing where a service also provides value added to them, transit will always be at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to priorities. And when the city starts having challenges as it relates to economic challenges and they have to start making choices, priorities will be made. I contend that transit is probably one of the most important services that the city has to offer. As a transit professional, when I look at what it is that we provide and talk about putting our department on a sustainable path, I think that we have to provide connectivity into the major job markets. And that's for the transit dependent. The middle class needs an affordable option, an environmental friendly option, whether we're talking about Fort George Meade, the National Security Agency, BWI International Airport, Arundel Mills for major entertainment or the commercial markets. There's got to be a better way than just a $60 cab ride. Or going over here and waiting for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes for the number 14. The city of Annapolis and I have proposed on 3 different occasions that we start providing service into Arundel Mills. They balked at it. And they didn't balk at it because they're anti-transit. They balked at it because we're climbing out of the recession of 2008. We're making priorities, and transit is not that high on the list. But I think that a sustainable path is to join our regional partners. So what does joining our regional partners mean? We've got a pool of $21 million in Central Maryland. That's $21 million of federal dollars. All the jurisdictions are competing for that $21 million. When we put in our annual transportation plans, Howard County gives, this is what we're going to do with ours. Annapolis gives, this is what we're going to do with ours. Laurel gives, which is northern Prince George's County, they give their ideas. And then the state divvies it up. We get rid of that competition the moment we say we're all going to participate in a consortium. And we're going to call it the Central Maryland Regional Transit Agency. Suddenly all that competition goes away. Now instead of having 5 different annual transportation plans, we have 1. Now there are economies of scale. And of those economies of scale, instead of having 5 different administrative staffs, City of Annapolis pays me $135,000 a year. While I enjoy receiving that, I'm advocating that they stop. I'm advocating that they stop because the job that I was given was to place this on a sustainable path. And the fact is, one person in my position is capable of overseeing all of Central Maryland. We're here in the city of Annapolis, and I don't even have a transportation plan. As a transit professional, I look at our ridership numbers. On an overall basis, our ridership has increased by 6%. But on 3 of our lines, I've seen ridership reduction of 23%, 16%, 11%. Well, why is that? That's because on the West Street corridor, where we implemented the so-called free circulator, and it's not free, there's no such thing as a free lunch, folks. Trust me. We're competing against our own routes. Why would somebody pay $2 to get on the bus when they can jump on the circulator, and even if they have to walk another 100 yards? Because if they're riding round trip, it's $4. And besides that, I can get a little exercise and keep my $4 in my pocket. But if I had a transportation planner, we could redesign our routes. I can think of 3 coaches where the ridership has gone down, and we could do our due diligence and redesign. That's 3 coaches for the connectivity into the northern part of the county. And I guarantee you that there are other inefficiencies both here in the city of Annapolis associated with the services that Anne Arundel County is running, that Howard County is running. Once we all really get together and we identify all of the inefficiencies, we can redesign those and go where people want to go. I want to service the transit dependent. I want to get them to jobs so that the housing authority becomes just a stopover until I get on my feet. But I also want to service the middle class. I want to service people who come here to do government business and they want to get on the bus and they want to go to BWI, instead of paying $60 or jumping on the number 14, which takes up an hour and a half, and if you miss it, that means 3 hours of your day. We want to service the whole spectrum of the citizenship. And by going regional, I believe that we can do that. My experience in working in regionalism for 32 years tells me in my heart of hearts that's the sustainable path for the city of Annapolis. You can probably tell by now I could sit and talk about transit all day long. But I'm not going to do that, because my friend John Powell, give me a couple minutes.
It'd take it half an hour at this point.
The city of Annapolis, when presented with this option, and I say, don't read anything into this. I say we have anti-transit advocates, people who would, if they had to choose between paying or not paying, they'll say get rid of transit. That doesn't mean that they don't like transit. And then you've got the transit advocates. Okay? City council voted unanimously to pursue the regional option. And I'm telling you that to say this. I haven't found anyone yet who says it's a bad idea. And everybody has their different reasons for thinking it's a bad idea. Over the last 3 years, here at Annapolis, just out of necessity, we have worked to make our operation more affordable. I'll give you an example. We have lowered our average cost per hour by $2 an hour. They had a hiring freeze. I talked until I was blue in the face, but I finally got council to understand. You think you're saving money by paying overtime, and I'm telling you you're not. Let me hire 15 more part-time operators, and your average cost per hour will go down by $2 an hour. And it did. So here in the city of Annapolis, I can tell you as a transit professional, I'm not saying, yeah, let's go regional to save money. And we will save money. We'll save administrative costs. You're not going to be paying $135,000 for a director of the Department of Transportation. However, there are some things that we are doing that we need to do, going against all accounting procedures. We've got bus drivers going out there that are collecting fares on the bus. And then the same position, and it could happen, the same driver who worked the day before is in the count room counting cash. Folks, that's a no-no. And I believe that the people who work for me are honest. But I don't believe in tempting people behind their means. But that's where we are because we are woefully under-resourced. We have bus drivers that are washing buses. It's 31 degrees outside. I've got bus drivers, and this is to their credit. They want you to see them in the best light when they take their coaches out. They're out there in the morning washing buses because the bus washer's broke. We've got the grant dollars to fix it. And we're slowly but surely moving forward. But because transit is so low on the list of priorities, that's why we're moving so slow. In a regional model, that would not happen. So when you think, why would somebody be the architect of the elimination of their own job? I'm not a climber. I'm almost 60 years old. This is about legacy to me. This is about leaving a lasting legacy here in Central Maryland. If my kids come here and they say my father or my grandfather was here, I'll leave them something that they can be proud of. They can say, and he had everything to do with what you see today. That, and I'm not afraid of the job market because I think I'm accomplished at what I do, and I really believe I can get another job. So when you hear the different versions of why we're talking about going regional, I just wanted to give you a different perspective. And John Powell's going to give you yet another one. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, John Powell.
That's a hard act to follow. I will begin by saying that he's undervaluing the effort that he made over the last 3 years. We were part of an activity to take a look at Annapolis Transit prior to Richard's arrival, and it was not in good shape. And Richard has done an extraordinary job There may have been other people in the country that have the background or the knowledge to do the same thing. That doesn't mean they get it done. There's a lot of people around that are smart and knowledgeable, and that doesn't mean they get anything done. So Richard is not, he deserves more credit than he's giving himself. We're going to talk a little bit about the Regional Transportation Agency. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Quick question before we get going. Is there anybody here from the Howard County League of Women Voters? No, we didn't make it. Oh, everybody's going to go to sleep. Okay. His presentation is, no, I'm kidding. His presentation is going to do three things.
It's all or nothing.
It's going to provide a brief overview as to the why for Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Prince George's County, and the city of Laurel. You will notice that it's missing Annapolis, city of Annapolis. It's not that we're ignoring the city of Annapolis, but Richard said it very well. We're doing these things for different reasons. And what we're going to do is explain to you why we are doing it. And that does not at all change the belief of the city of Annapolis being part of it, but it explains to you how all this got started. We'll do it with the usual who, what, where, when, and how, and all that kind of stuff. You can get off.
It's all or nothing.
Can everybody see?
No, that's fine.
We're going to provide a summary of the Memorandum of Understanding, just give you an idea of what's going on, because you hear a lot about the MOU. And then we're going to answer a couple questions that some of you may have, and then open the floor for others. So let's go through them. Who's been invited to the dance? These are all the organizations, jurisdictions that we are talking about being part of the Regional Transportation Agency. They're all the organizations and jurisdictions that are involved in transit in Central Maryland. Now, what we expect to happen, essentially, is to take the administrative and operating activities that are right now involving 4 different operations and put them into one single operation. It's the economy of scale that Richard talked about. It's also the opportunity to do a little better job of communication, coordination, and provide some of the support services that everybody doesn't have. A good example is a route planner. We'll have 2 route planners that will be involved in the RTA. One of them will be focused in the Annapolis area, one of them will be focused in the Central Maryland area. We'll have a safety and training manager. Right now, he doesn't have a safety and training manager. So we have all of these different types of opportunities. On the other hand, there's a flip side. He has a brand manager, and that brand manager does an excellent job selling advertising on the buses. We do not have a brand manager. So all of a sudden, we gain a brand manager that can sell advertising on all the buses. This is a partnership, and it's something that will work for both of us and all of us. Okay, where will the changes occur? Now, you look at the map at these various areas, and all of a sudden you pick up where the RTA will be, and you'll see it's going to be a pretty extensive operation. There's a lot of power in the near hills. And it's not just a matter of where the buses operate and can they operate more efficiently and can they operate more effectively. But when Richard talks about the opportunity for a route that goes from Annapolis to Arundel Mills, it's one thing for the city to argue that position. It's another thing for Anne Arundel and the city and Howard County and Prince George's County and the city of Laurel to all argue for that position because they know that it is good for the region. That is one of the things that happens when you put all of this together. Now, the changes are going to take place for us July the 1st. Whether the city of Annapolis is involved July the 1st will be determined, I believe, next Monday. But for us, we have to go in July the 1st. The reason for that is our contract with the Central Maryland Regional Transit Corporation, CMRT, will expire on June the 30th. Their contract with First Transit, who is operating their services, expires June the 30th. So we need to have another operator. So we have no choice. Howard County and Arundel County for the western services, Prince George's County, City of Laurel for the services out of the city. We need to have a different operator July the 1st. Now, why are we doing what we're doing? Very quickly. There was a study that was started in 2007 that was funded by the MTA to take a look at sustainability of transit in central Maryland. The truth of the matter was, it was looking at sustainability of transit with Central Maryland Regional Transit Corporation. Because every year there were issues with them running out of money and going back to the well and trying to figure out what they were going to do. And there wasn't enough support to make sure that they had the funding that they needed to carry forward. Another report was completed in Howard County, it was also by KFH, and it essentially came up with the same conclusion as the first one. You have to do something different. You have to set up the organization in a different way. Our county executive, Ken Allman, then put together a commission and said, okay, we have these reports, this is all well and good, what are we going to do next? And then in 2012, they created, through this commission, the Office of Transportation and hired me. We'll see in the future whether that was good or bad, but we'll see how all that works out. Now, there are a couple things that were identified very quickly. And that is that there's a number of duplicative and unnecessary expenses that are occurring with our operation. Again, this is not the city of Annapolis. We have a contract manager with 18 full-time employees, and a contract operator with 130. The contract manager has a chief executive officer, and his job is to make sure the general manager is doing his job. We then have a director of operations. His job is to make sure the assistant general manager of operations does his job. We then have a director of finance and administration that takes the invoices they get from the accountant, slaps on a new logo, and sends it out. A little more complicated than that, I don't want to, but we now have a paratransit manager whose job it is to oversee a paratransit manager. I'm not making this up. This is what we're doing. We have 2 quality service monitors, and their job is to make sure that the road supervisors are doing their job. In addition to all of that, we've got duplication in other areas, from supplies and equipment, liability insurance, to legal fees, depreciation. These are all duplicative expenses that we have going on with our operations. What our fine commission said was there are advantages to having everybody work together. There are the economies of scale. But when you have First Transit, CMRT, and Howard County, and the other jurisdictions involved in it, you're losing the value of those economies of scale. And they are, without question, correct. Let me give you some actual numbers. I hope you're all sitting down. These are the areas that we'll at least discuss. And these are what we're paying the contract operator. These particular costs add up to somewhere around $631,000. Now remember, it's the job of the contract manager to take a look at the contract operator 1, the contract operator 2, we'll discuss in a minute. You have $2,044,447 of the actual contractor who's doing the work, and that would make sense. It's going to be much higher cost than it is for the individuals that are just overseeing it. But you take a look at the first line and you see we've got 2 people essentially running one operation at almost $300,000. We got 2 people involved in operation at almost $200,000. We only need 1. And Richard mentioned that. He mentioned that earlier. The second operation, the contract operator here, is very small, but that's actually the Anne Arundel County Paratransit Service. We've included this as part of the analysis because you've got another senior management person making $85,000 a year, and all of these people are running services in the same area. You can almost hit each other with a stone, and yet we're all paying for it. Everybody in this room is paying to support this. That's your total existing. You have an RTA projected for what we think some of these costs will be. Now all of a sudden we have $1,593,000 of expense reduction. Now that's a simple analysis. that doesn't even begin to go into the analyses that we have completed as part of this process. But you start putting this together, it becomes very easy to see, okay, now wait a minute, why do we need 3 people to do what one person does? That's $250,000. That's 2 bus drivers and 2 buses on a route that we could be running instead of paying 3 people to do one job. You put together the next 3 positions, there's 2 more bus drivers on another route, providing transportation increased services. So we sit back and look at these, and yes, philosophically, it's very easy to answer some of this stuff, but you get into these numbers and you find out that there's some real dollar reasons that we're doing what we're doing. Now there is a secondary reason, and you guys don't have this problem with the city of Annapolis. And I actually used the example the other day when I was talking to the county council, city council, excuse me, got county council on the brain. Right now, we provide about 13% of the funding to CMRT. 87% of the funding goes to First Transit. For that, we have minimal oversight on what CMRT does. There is very little control that we have over their operation. We have 0 oversight over First Transit. And to give you an idea, during one of your snow events, I happened to be sitting in the office of Director Newell, and he was talking to the people from the city, and they were talking about what they were going to do as part of the snow event, and I was sitting there jealous because I'm not allowed to call First Transit. I can't talk to them. I have to call the contract manager.
But you pay them.
But I pay him 87%. Contract manager then calls them. They then, at their leisure, call back, and then CMRT at their leisure calls me back. So I was jealous. I was sitting in his office, absolutely jealous. Well, our friends of Anne Arundel County and the city of Laurel, they even have a worse issue. They have 0 oversight to either one of these guys. They just give them grants and say, have a nice day. And it's just the way the grants were set up. That adds up to about $14 million. We have $14 million of your tax dollars and my tax dollars going out and funding this kind of a scenario. So it wasn't only the money that was an issue for Howard County, it was the oversight. And we've made this comment I don't know how many times. If we had only saved a penny, we'd be doing what we're doing. Because this is a huge, huge issue. Now, there's one other reason we're doing what we're doing. Before I get to that, I want to give you an analogy. You want to hire somebody to cut your lawn and trim your hedges. And you hire a company A that's going to charge you $115 a week. They then hire a company B to cut the lawn, trim the hedges, and they're going to pay $100 a week. Company B doing the work provides an invoice for the work, which is then turned into an invoice for the company A that you've contracted with, and company A also will answer any questions or concerns that you may have. You're prohibited from talking to the people who are cutting the grass and trimming the hedges. So, instead of paying $100 a week and being able to talk to the people that are cutting your lawn and trimming your hedges, you're paying $115 a week and you can't talk to them. Now, how many in here are going to sign up for that? Don't everybody raise their hands at once, please. I can't count them. We've been doing this since 1992. That's how long we've, excuse me, it's 2002. We've been doing it since 2002. Now, the spaghetti mesh. Everybody loves the spaghetti mesh. This is how the funding in Central Maryland for public transit is organized. And if at the end of it, if any of you can use the term organized, I would like you to stand up and explain to me the term organized. We'll start with the funding entities. There are a number of major funding entities from the Federal Transit Administration, Maryland Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration, who then gives the money to Howard County, as an example. Howard County then takes the money and gives it to the Office of Transportation, sort of the same, but we left it in there, who then gives the money to CMRT, who then gives the money to First Transit. They then give the money to a few other companies that are funded through CMRT and the Howard County. We also have money coming in that goes to the Department of Citizen Services that helps to fund Neighbor Ride. I know we have Partners in Care here. There she is, which is a similar organization to Neighbor Ride. Does a great job with the volunteer help. We have rideshare, money going through all those people for a rideshare program that we operate. And then the Maryland Department of Social Services gives money to Baltimore, to Howard County, Office of Transportation, to BWI, who then gives it to those three companies. Every single one of those lines is bureaucracy and cost. It involves departments of purchasing, departments of law. It's grants back to departments of law because they keep popping in. And people making reports, people filing the reports, people having to read the reports, and sending them to the Office of Law. So we also have MDA, now you gotta watch this one, this one's fun. Maryland Department of Social Services gives money to the Anne Arundel Department of Social Services, which then gives the money back to the MTA, which then gives the money to CMRT, which then gives the money to First Transit. So it goes from the state to the county, back to the state, back down to CMRT, over to First Transit. We're only halfway through the slide. Organized? Anybody organized here? Okay, MDOT also provides money directly to CMRT. So not only are they going through other people to get to CMRT, they go directly to CMRT. MTA also gives money to CMRT, which, by the way, is all going to First Transit. City of Lower is involved because they give money to CMRT, and your good friends here at Anne Arundel County give money to CMRT with two different grants from the same county. Two different grants. Laws is involved again, as well as purchasing and other operations. Anne Arundel also provides funding to the Anne Arundel County Department of Aging for a First Transit and a taxi voucher. That's a First Transit operation. Here's a First Transit operation. You have two First Transit operations. They can hit each other with a rock. And you have two separate organizations, two separate funding cycles. We also have MTA gives the money to good old city of Annapolis, which gives the money to Annapolis Transit. And they also provides funding to ARTMA for rideshare, and then over here to the BWI Business Partnership. Finally, under the 5310 program, there are a lot of different organizations that receive funding. Then under the JARC and New Freedom Grant, there are lots of other organizations that receive funding. There's Partners in Care. You also notice CMRT here, CMRT there, BWI there, BWI there. Every single one of these lines is bureaucracy and cost. That's our spaghetti mesh. Organized. Anybody think it's organized? I'm not getting many hands up here. You notice that? Very frustrating.
It's organized chaos.
Okay. Probably right. So what are the major improvements? And the last slide on why we are doing it. It is regional. It's a single voice. It's a single purpose. And a lot of that Richard has already covered when he was speaking. But the idea is that you have one person sitting up there saying, for the whole region, these are the kinds of things we need to do. And to start building support for the transportation programs. And we've had conversations with Partners in Care, just as we have with Neighbor Ride, as well as we have with other community organizations. The whole idea of what we're trying to build with this regional activity is support. And at the end of the day, if you get more support, then there's more funding to help some of the organizations like Partners in Care and Neighbor Rides and others. And you take a look at the very effective authorities that have been operating around the country, and all of them are good stewards of the transportation operations in the community. None of them are created to put everybody out of business. They're created to start getting support and trying to get efficiencies when possible. And you look at the bottom and you see the reduction in operating costs is achieved. 0.95, 3.5, that's quite a range. I'm sure all of you are saying, what nut came up with that? Well, depends on what we do. If Howard County's in it alone, we save about $938,000. We'll actually save more than that. We'll save about $938,000. If Anne Arundel County and Howard, who has indicated that they will be in, if Anne Arundel County and Howard County are in, we'll save total $1.4 million. Anne Arundel County itself saves $373,000. If Howard County and Prince George's County are in by themselves, it's 1.5. And then you go all the way down here, you see the different activities in the matrix, and you end up with all the services down here, and that adds up to $3.256 million. That's a lot of additional service, if indeed the money's used for additional services. And in this chart, the amount of money being saved in the city of Annapolis is woefully understated. And it's because of the way the bids came in, and these are actually based on the bids that we received from First Transit. But because of the way it was structured, we ended up just throwing that number on a piece of paper and ending up with the savings that we had. But we'll actually end up with more from the city of Annapolis. So the idea is to go from that to something that looks like that. And you'll notice these other boxes are still in there. You'll notice Partners in Care hasn't gone away. It's simply a different way of trying to control the funding that is flowing through the state so that we reduce redundancy, we reduce cost, and we make things a lot simpler for everyone else. Now, how are we going to get this done? This is very important. This is a basic slide that we've been showing for a year and a half, but it is confusing people. So we're going to do this differently. Howard County put out an RFP, and that RFP, request for proposals, was worked on by the City of Annapolis, Mr. Newell, our friends from the City of Laurel, Prince George's, and Anne Arundel County, as well as Howard County. We have provided a contract, awarded the contract to First Transit, who is a national operator of transit management services. And the contract is for 3 people. That's all it is. 3 people. The general manager and 2 assistant general managers. That's all the contract with First Transit is for. First Transit, in their process, and they're doing that right now, is setting up a company, which I understand now is Transit Management of Central Maryland, but they are going to set up a wholly owned subsidiary, a different corporation, a different box, that will be owned by First Transit. And inside that box is where the RTA services will reside. So often people hear me talk about the box. It's the corporation we're talking about. And inside that box is where all the employees go. All the drivers, all the mechanics, all of the equipment, all the buses, everything that we have that's part of the service delivery goes inside of that box. The 3 people that we have hired from First Transit will then manage what's inside that box. So their job is to manage the corporation. First Transit then gets removed from the equation for all intents and purposes, and we have the Central Maryland Transportation and Mobility Commission. That was a name created by George Cardwell from Anne Arundel County. They will have representation from each of the funding jurisdictions, equal representation on that board, regardless of how much money they're putting in. And their job is to oversee the box, the corporation, not First Transit. That box, for all intents and purposes, reports to that commission. Now, let's say these guys don't do their job. We bring in another 3 to manage it. And what didn't change? Anything in that box. All the rules, the procedures, the employees, the contracts with the unions, nothing changed except the 3 people managing that operation. And that's the beauty of this design, is that once it's created, once we have it created and developed and established, it will then continue to move forward and grow and increase in its professionalism and its efficiency and its effectiveness. And it doesn't have to worry about, in 3 years, everything changing again. Again, a difference between the city of Annapolis and the way we operate service. If we weren't doing this July the 1st, we'd be doing the same thing we were doing before, and we could possibly have a whole new cast of characters involving our services, which means new training, new education, becoming knowledgeable of the area. We'll never have to do that again under this construct. Now, what is a memorandum of understanding that you've heard about? This is very simple. Work together to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of public transit in Central Maryland. Said simply, ladies and gentlemen, play nice in the sandbox. Let's sit down and figure out what's the best way to be doing what it is that we're doing. And let's do it in a cooperative and a helpful manner. Utilize the contract between Howard County and First Transit to operate the services beginning July 1. Somebody has to be the recipient of these funds. If Annapolis wants to do it, they can do it. If Anne Arundel wants to do it, they can do it. They can't do it now because we don't have enough time. But they could have done it. Howard County stepped up and said, we'll do it. So essentially, we're going to act as a funnel. The funding comes through us, and then it shoots over to First Transit. Remember again, the commission runs the box.
John, this is a good time for me to articulate that, in fact, when we first started talking about this, I asked Mr. Powell, why don't you just give Annapolis Transit the money and we expand? He said, if Annapolis would do that, that would be fine with us. I took it to the then city manager, and he said, Richard, I don't think that there's an appetite here in the city to do that. And that's not good or bad. That's just the political reality of the city that we live in. It's okay if the city has decided, as a municipality, we don't want to shoulder transit anymore. We want the benefits, but we don't want to shoulder this cost anymore. Guess what, folks? Cities all over the country have been doing this for decades. I spent an entire career. My father's company was purchased by a transit authority. There were 6 other communities that were bought out by this transit authority because they made the same decision that Annapolis has made but hasn't made. It's like we're caught between 2 opinions. There are some people saying, well, we're going to give up control of our transit agency. Some of the same people who are saying, we don't want to bear the cost of local transit. Nobody is asking the city of Annapolis to give up control of its transit assets or resources. We're saying put it in a sustainable model. You'll still be controlling the resources, but in a different model. All the jurisdictions will have representation on the transit board. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Yeah. Not that I had any choice.
He's my friend.
Finally, we're going to establish a steering committee to develop the primary bylaws for the commission. And let's not underestimate the challenge of this getting done. We can't even get a simple MOU signed that says let's all play nice in the sandbox. However, there are bylaws for transit agencies / transit authorities from every state in the union except ours. we can get enough information and enough examples that we can sit down with our partners and probably in a very short period of time end up with the bylaws that we need. We're going to answer just, oh yeah, here's the status. This is important. Actually, it's so important because it's actually changed already. Anne Arundel County Transportation Commission has recommended that the county partner in the RTA, the MOU is scheduled for signing. The MOU is actually in the executive's office ready to get signed. And we're hoping that if it isn't signed today or tomorrow, at the very worst it'll be signed by the end of the week. But we actually think it'll be signed before that. Prince George's County is in the final review of the MOU. We just have to wait for that process. The funding that they provide, however, or that is provided in their name, comes from the Maryland Department of Transportation, and that's going to be locked up when we get the signing for the City of Laurel. The intention is for that to be signed, a resolution to be approved, for the mayor to sign on the 24th, which coincidentally is the same day as the City Council meeting here. And that resolution is sitting on my desk, so I know that that resolution exists. And then finally, we're going to have a City Council meeting here on the 24th to finalize its position. And we keep hearing different things. We're positive one day, the next day somebody's got this issue. We're going to try to respond to everybody in time so that all questions are answered. But we certainly do hope that Annapolis will be supportive and be part of it. What we've said to Annapolis since the first time I met with the county, with the City Council, is that the RTA will work very well and very efficiently with Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Prince George's County, and the City of Laurel. If Annapolis becomes part of it, it becomes something different. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So we really want Annapolis to be part of the RTA, and we made that very clear. Now, just a couple of questions that everybody seems to have all the time, so we're going to answer them. Participation in the RTA reduces or eliminates funding requirements? No, it doesn't. If the cost of operating transit service in Annapolis is $50 an hour, and you have 10,000 hours a week of transit service, it's going to cost you $50,000, if I have that added right, a week, and that's what it is. And to just think that you're going to become part of the RTA and now you can cut that in half and still get all that service is not going to happen. So it's going to be up to the City Council, it's going to be up to the mayor. Do they want to support transit like they did last year or not? What we do know is that they support transit at the level of they did last year. Even if they support transit at the level they did, or less than the level they did last year, but just by some small percentage, there actually may be an opportunity to increase service. But if there is a drastic cut in the revenue or in the funding that comes from the City of Annapolis, then there's going to have to be a cut in service, whether or not it's part of the RTA or not part of the RTA. And the truth is, if it's not part of the RTA, that cut will be worse than it will be than if it's part of the RTA. Service to residents will change. Again, that depends on the funding level. But the idea of the RTA is that on June the 30th, the drivers leave their facility and they've got a patch on their shoulder that says Annapolis Transit. On July the 1st, they leave the facility, same routes, same schedules, same everything, and the patch says RTA. That's the intention. Now, our intention in Howard County is to actually increase service. And we are already working on the service changes that we're going to implement. So we will have an increase in service, but we will not have a decrease in service. But again, that's up to the city. That's a decision for the city to make. The city fathers and mothers have to make that decision as to how much they want to do, how much they want to fund the services. We will not be able to control the services that we operate. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that question and concern, I'd have a lot of nickels. No. Since day one, we have argued, Howard County, much less anyone else, that nobody's going to tell us what we're going to do with our individual services. So if Annapolis Transit wants to change the blue route, changes the blue route. We don't care. That's up to Annapolis Transit. If Annapolis Transit wants to change the circulator, change the circulator. There's nothing in the RTA construct that takes that control away from the local jurisdictions. And there's language right in the MOU to talk about it. We made that very clear over and over and over again, and yet we sit in meetings and people say, well, we need to control our services. I don't know how else to say it. If anybody here has a way we need to clarify this language, please let me know. But it's pretty straightforward to me. And yet we keep hearing that question. It is important that our existing employees continue to have jobs. Every bargaining unit employed by First Transit in Elkridge, for the Connect-A-Ride and Howard County services, for the Annapolis Transit services, will have to apply for a job, do a drug screen, and then they will have to go through a background check. And assuming they pass those, because they passed them already, because they have a job at Elkridge or Annapolis, then they have a job. There's no question. We're not going to start off trying to retrain 150 new employees. We're going to utilize the employees that are already there because they have the experience and the skills that we need. So this question keeps popping up, just as that question above keeps popping up. And we keep giving the same answer, and for some reason it's not sinking. And I don't know why. The employees will have jobs. The bargaining unit employees will all have jobs. There may be some changes at the executive level. Bless you. And that's the purpose. Part of the savings is from the executive level because we've already talked about the fact we don't need 3 or 4 general managers to do one job. But all the bargaining unit people that drive buses, the people that maintain the buses, are all going to have a job provided they pass those tests that they've already passed already. The rules and regulations will be from First Transit. No. Talk about the box. That's one of the reasons we're creating the box. It's our box. It's your box. It's all of your box. We all have a box. And the rules and regulations that go into that box are going to be the rules and regulations that we create. And the rules and regulations that the commission, that is made up of the representatives from the various jurisdictions, will approve. They will not be First Transits. Now, we will certainly use First Transits as a guide. They only operate 20,000 buses in the country with X number of employees, so they have some experience in this stuff. But at the end of the day, what we decide in these rules are going to be ours. And finally, there are a few, if any, downsides, but there is still some concerns. Well, there's always fear in the unknown. Change is stressful. We all like to control what we can control. We're all used to doing what we're used to doing. But once you start changing stuff, it becomes a little unsettling, whether it's personal or professional. So, we have fear of the unknown. And I gave this presentation to the City Council last week, and I started talking about the fear of the known. And this is spoken from a position of someone who believes in public transit. Public transit service between Washington and Baltimore is not meeting demand. You have any meeting with any group in this area and ask them what the first priority is, what the biggest problem is, and transportation is at the top, if not second. But generally it's at the top. Anybody that's driven around the area knows that transportation is a problem. Anybody that goes from the western part of the area to Fort Meade and NSA knows that it's a problem. Anybody that's up on 95 knows it's a problem. I hear about it, or heard about it when I was at CMRT from our chair, the past chair, who did a lot of traveling on 97. And all she would complain about every time I saw her was the traffic on 97 and how bad it has gotten. So we know that that's a fact. The predominance of these services operate on 1-hour headways. Richard and I come from far away. We're not Marylandians by birth. I will tell you from my perspective, given the number of people that work in this area, the number of people that are on the roads, the job opportunities, the wealth of the area overall, this is the lousiest public transit services that I've ever seen. And I have lived all over the country. I've lived in 20% of the states. And I've visited every single major city and spent time on it. And I've never seen a transit operation like we've got between Baltimore and Washington. And there are reasons for it. And some of it is that spaghetti slide. And some of it is because nobody has sat back and said we need to look at this stuff from a regional perspective. But whatever the reason is, we have lousy service. Now, is it important service? You bet. Because the people that use this service need to use this service. They're the transit dependents, and we take that service away from them and they have problems. So it is an important service. But it is not the level of service that we need to get cars off the street and try to reduce some of the congestion. I've seen this in 5 years that I've lived here. I've seen the traffic congestion get worse. Population increase, all the forecasts say it's going to continue to boom. It's going to continue to boom really in this area. Howard County is somewhat limited. It's Anne Arundel is going to be the big player in the population boom. And certainly Arundel Mills and some of these other activities help. State funding for public transit's been the same since 2010. We've not gotten one additional penny out of the state for the last 4 years, and it'll be going in the next year, so that's 5 years. Increasing local funding for public transit has been a challenge. Richard already talked about that. Our city councilman knows about that. All of you know about that. That's similar here as it is everywhere else. Howard County, to their credit, has been providing additional revenues each year, or additional funding. But I will also tell you that a lot of that's been because we've had reserves from the year before that we've been able to carry forward. So we've been able to get through our times without really reducing any service. But for other people, there have been drastic cuts throughout the state. This is a big challenge. The region has a number of organizations involved in transit that are competing for the dollars, and they're conflicting, with their purposes and agendas are conflicting with each other. This is not Partners in Care. There are others, however. And this is not helping us as we try to build a transportation network. And they also make these things very difficult. We got people getting on buses for the connector ride services that call CMRT, and the drivers have First Transit. And nobody can figure out what they're doing. And then they get down to the city of Laurel, and now they're getting on a bus that says Howard County, and with the same driver. It's confusion. And that one of the things George Cardwell talked to me when he first talked to me about transit was the confusion that's occurring out there because of the way that the service is set up. Now you take a look at these, and I will sit back and I will argue this is a lot more scary to me than the unknown of what's going to happen when the agency is created. And finally, they often compete for funding, which Richard had already said. So what we're talking about here is an opportunity. I like to quote that wonderful, wonderful phrase from that really great movie, Matrix, where at the end of the movie, the Neo gets on the phone and he tells the computers, I'm not going to tell you how this is going to end. I'm going to tell you how this is going to begin. That's what this is. We're creating an opportunity for something to happen. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but the opportunity is there for it to happen. And it's going to all be based on his commission. We get the right people on the commission, people that are interested in transit, people that can carry some weight, people that people will listen to, and all of a sudden we can start increasing the transit that we have in the area to try to serve those needs that we have. My favorite saying, if you always do what you've always done, and you'll always get what you always got. Henry Ford. And there are very few truisms that are as true as that. And we can leave everything alone and everybody can be happy and satisfied and go home tonight and everything's, and then in 1 year, you're going to be having the same conversation. So, we continue to believe and hope that Annapolis will be part of it. We now know that Anne Arundel's ready to sign it, City of Laurel's ready to pass it. We have support from the MTA, we have support from MDOT. As Richard said, nobody is arguing the concept. Even the organization that is primarily impacted by this, CMRT, will sit down and tell you we need a regional entity. They just think they should be it. But they know that they need a regional entity. So nobody is against what it is we're doing. It's just concerns. And with that, I'll leave you alone and turn it back over to Richard, give you an idea of what the buses and the cars are going to look like, just so that you understand where this is not fantasy and this is not philosophy and it's not just discussions for discussion's sake. Those buses are already operating in the area, and that car gets looks wherever it goes. They think it's on a NASCAR. So I thank you.
Thank you, John.
I'll turn it back over to you.
Two things I think that we need to touch on. John talked about CMRT, and I'm sure that if you have not heard anything about CMRT, you will. CMRT is a 501c3. They're not a jurisdiction. Their board is not comprised of any representatives from any jurisdiction. They essentially serve as a conduit. Nice people. I've met their general manager. John used to be their general manager before he moved on to Howard County. John called his concoction up here the spaghetti mash. I told him the first time I saw it that it reminds me of a 1970 style General Motors bureaucracy. You folks remember when they had 26 levels of management? And essentially business that could be pretty much dispatched through a more horizontal level of administration is going through all these levels of bureaucracy. We can't afford that in government. One of the things that we're beginning to find out in public service is that by necessity, we've got to be more efficient in what it is that we do. And I can tell you as a manager in public service now for a very good while, we're not finding ourselves with a glut of funding. We're having to go into our existing funding levels and find where the inefficiencies are. And this is, in fact, identifying inefficiencies on a global level in the region and figuring out what we can do to help our own case as it relates to provisioning transit here in Central Maryland. You're also going to hear about the fact that in the state legislature, there has been legislation introduced for the creation of, they're being called transit benefit zones. Essentially, it's the genesis of creation of transit authorities. I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years to get legislation through. As the director of the Department of Transportation here in Annapolis, the reason that I have advocated regionalism is because over the last 3 years, the one thing that I have come to know is that the problem that met me when I came in the door in 2010, I don't think that it was insurmountable or something that couldn't be fixed. But I think it's closely associated with the attitude that our municipality has towards transit itself. And I think that the only sustainable path is to put it in a model that can peacefully coexist with the political establishment. The only sustainable model that I know of is the regional model. And in the absence of that, we're going to go from woefully under-resourced to being extremely strained back where we were in 2010. And I don't think that anybody here in the city wants that. Folks, when I got here, and I've been given credit for a lot of things, between me and you, I took the strategic plan off the shelf. It wasn't my idea to implement the circulator. Market pricing in our garages. I used my industry knowledge to get it done. But in fact, some pretty smart people before I got here had already said that this is something that needed to be done. And in fact, I have found that it just lacked a champion.
Well, it's just about 3 o'clock, and I want to thank you both very much. I think we've all learned a lot. I will tell you, I am an advocate of public transportation, and I don't think public transportation has to pay its way. I think it's a really important thing. So, everybody here, thank you very much for coming. We do appreciate it, and maybe we'll continue this discussion at another time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't forget, council meeting, and this will certainly be discussed on March 24th at the Annapolis City Council meeting. And folks, Alderman Ken Kirby, or any other public officials here? Alderman Ken Kirby, thank you for coming in, supporting us. He has been a strong supporter of this moving forward, and I just wanted to recognize it.